Kost, welcome. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon. We wanted to open up today to kind of let you have a chance to share a little bit about who you are and how you came to be involved with college counseling and just curriculum in general.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I've done college counseling for a very long time, and in part it was that I saw that there were students who were just not getting good advice and really didn't understand the college application process, weren't making good choices about what to study and where. And I didn't have very good college counseling myself, so I wanted to correct that. And especially for students who don't have a family history of generations of college attendance. Those students tend to have a better hold or better handle on what to do and when to do it and how to do it. So I really wanted to make sure that students knew, but I mean, the landscape is changing so quickly that even students who do have that family history of college attendance still need guidance.
Yeah, that's true. I want to share, I said in the intro that I came to know you back, I think it was 2012. I had the opportunity of working under you. And one of the things that I don't know that everyone knows about you is how devoted you are to keeping rigor in the classroom. And it was something that I really, really respected about you as my boss. And so how has rigor, maybe as far as what a student's academic program, currently is, how is that playing into the roles of acceptances?
Rigor is one of the most important things. There's students can check, families can check the common data set. So if you put in your favorite search engine, common data set, and then the name of the university that you're considering, in section C7, it will tell you exactly what the university looks for. And I can show you that. If I can share my screen, I can even show you
Sure.
what that looks like. Okay,
Sure.
then I shall go right there.
Now you might have to verbally walk us through it for our podcast listeners who might not be able to see it, but certainly throw it up there and then kind of tell them what you're seeing.
Okay, let me get there. So let's see, we'll look at, I have University of Miami's up, so I shall share my screen. So all I did was put in common data set and then the name of a university. University of Miami just happened to be the first one that came up. So, okay, then we scroll down to 7, and here is what they tell you exactly what they are looking for in terms of academic and non-academic qualities. So you see that rigor of secondary school record is number 1. So
wow, that's really impressive.
And they say that it's very important. So rigor, how do you evince rigor? Well, you evince rigor by, you could perhaps take an AP course or an IB course or an ACE course, but you could also make sure that your high school, like we did at Oxbridge, it totally avoided AP, IB, ACE, but we evinced rigor in a different way by projects. And that's where something like what you do comes in, because you're able to demonstrate that these students are doing something out of the ordinary. Because remember, millions of students, millions of AP exams are taken every year, but how many students are doing what your students are doing? Right. So it really sets them apart in the college admissions process. Anytime that a student is doing something that demonstrates his or her own path, so they're cutting their own path, machete in hand, and cutting through the overgrowth and finding their own way, and doing something that shows initiative and perseverance and results. I mean, it's just extraordinary, and it really sets them apart in a fantastic way in the college admissions process.
That reminds me of the advice I give to the science fair kids about you need to have a great backstory for why the judge should care about your project. And it sounds like you're telling students they need to make sure they have a great backstory. Quick question. Of the students that you work with, what do you find is the most common mistakes in their applications? And can you differentiate your answer with respect to kids that don't have any family members that have a college education, like first-time college applicants or first-time students, with no family history of college versus the old pros? Could you share a little about that?
Sure, absolutely. The one part of the college application that a student has complete control over is the college essay. And I think that many students make enormous errors on the college essay. And that's really one of my areas of expertise. I always tell students and families that I would rather spend a weekend helping students with their college essays than a weekend in the Bahamas, because I love it. It really, and there are so many mistakes that students make with their college essays. So often they'll reiterate their resume, and that's not a good idea. You're already putting your resume or your list of activities in the common application. Or they'll make someone else the hero of their essay. So they'll talk full things that their uncle did, or their dad did, or their grandparents did, or their brother, and they won't focus on themselves. They'll be talking about somebody else, and that is not what they want to see. Also, college admissions officers really want to see your core values. So I would say, honestly, this problem with the college essay is equally present regardless of family history. So you can have a fourth generation college attender still making the same mistakes on that essay as a first gen. So that's a big mistake. Also, not understanding, while it is true that many of the universities in the country outside of the state of Florida, because Florida state universities still mandate the SAT or ACT for college admissions, many other universities have decided to make it SAT or ACT optional. And so many families think, oh, well, that's great because my student doesn't test very well, or my student has test anxiety. So we'll just forget all about the test and my student will get into an Ivy League school. And that is not how that happens, because first of all, students who do have really high scores will submit those, and that will look very good, but also the quality of not only the rigor of the academic record and the projects that they have engaged with, but also the activities that they have, the extracurricular activities that they have done. Those will matter more than ever in an SAT optional. And so many people are predicting that SAT optional will continue far into the future. I don't think so. I'm 3 days a week, I'm with admissions officers from all over the country in webinars and reading articles. And when you ask them, okay, how are you evaluating these applications for whether or not these students are likely to be successful in your university? And they say, we really don't know. We're doing our best. We're making our best guess. But what that means is, for students whose high schools do not have a long record of sending students to a particular university, the university is very unlikely to take a chance on a student from an unknown high school.
Right.
So that's one of the things we're seeing. Let's see, what other mistakes? So I would say failing to practice and do one's best on the SAT or ACT is a mistake. Let's see, what else? Oh, parents. I was quoted in the New York Times about this problem. Parents are coddling their students. So they are
They're moving with them. Forget coddling. They're moving in with them. I see them all. I think you and I talked about this recently. They're all over Facebook talking about, I don't like my son's professor. And so how do I fight? It's ridiculous.
Oh, yes, that is definitely happening. Well, let me go back to that in a second. Well, actually, let me address that. So I would say I've been doing this since 1998. Last year or the year before last, almost all of my private clients intended to move to where their son or daughter was attending university or to rent an apartment or something along those lines before COVID. And now, of course, with COVID, it's they have them in their own homes.
In their
because
homes.
A lot of them are studying from home.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question about COVID, actually, if you don't mind me popping back to one thing you just said. It got me thinking. So you mentioned that schools that don't have a long record of sending students to these higher level universities are overlooked, right? They're looking for those who have a history. How has COVID impacted? We have a lot of schools that pop up, these like new approaches to education. People either, don't want to go back to a public school system or they can't afford a private school system. So we have these pods that are like growing up everywhere. How has COVID changed what the college admission field looks like?
Well, a lot of those pods are K through 8. But there's a huge push toward homeschooling in high school as well, in part because of values and some other movements that are political that people want to avoid. And so I am working with a lot more homeschoolers. And they tend to do very well. They have very clear ways of writing their own transcripts and creating a portfolio of the things that they have achieved during their high school years. Often they're taking dual enrollment. So they have those credits to show. And I think there's a huge push, especially in Florida, but other states as well, for dual enrollment, so that many students are graduating from high school with an associate's degree, which saves a lot of money.
Right. Quick question about the move towards or the movement towards homeschool. Do you find, in your experience working with kids, do you find that I'm just going to ask a flat out question. Do you find that it's mostly like white families that are starting the homeschools, or do you find that homeschooling is not based on race or ethnicity? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's very interesting that you should ask that, because in the could have been July, but I think it was June issue, one of the June issues of the New Yorker magazine, there was an article about the rise of Black homeschooling. And so I have to say that and my first experience with homeschoolers was actually back in Connecticut in the mid-90s, and they were Black families because they felt that Jamila Potts right now writes about how white educators spirit murder Black children. And then, of course, there's another psychologist who talks about, there's a documentary and a book called Pushed Out, about how white middle-class educators tend to get very defensive and punitive with Black adolescent girls who their behavior, a Black educator, this psychologist claims, would just brush their behavior off and just say, well, they're just being who they are. Whereas white educators get very upset with their behaviors. So for those reasons, we're seeing in part, and also, again, political issues, and now COVID, there are certainly many families who are making the decision to homeschool regardless of ethnicity and socioeconomic strata.
Well, that was my next question, was the socioeconomic factor. It seems to me like you'd have to be in a place where you're comfortable enough where there's at least someone else bringing home some income, or if you're
middle class at least, right? Do you find that there are such things as families of lower economic status that have homeschools or pods? Is that something you're aware of?
Really?
Oh,
Really?
sure. Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. We usually attend the Florida Parent Educator Association meeting every Memorial Day weekend in Orlando, and thousands of folks attend this. It's the largest convention of homeschoolers, parent educators
Wow.
in the country, according to what they say. And they are across the board. I do feel that they tend to be more conservative. And I'll give you an example of that. When I go to meetings or conventions with folks on the left of the political spectrum, what I tend to see is a lot of complaining about problems with the country, and railing against various against capitalism, for example, and different founding principles of the country. But when I go to the Florida Parent Educator convention, every day begins with the pledge of allegiance to the flag, presentation of colors by kids who are in sort of junior ROTC and Sea Scouts and similar. And they do quizzes about the different amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. I mean, it's really fascinating to see just how different the either pole is currently.
Well, that is actually very eye-opening for me, because we were just at a homeschool expo yesterday, as we were kind of looking to maybe market to that crowd to provide those opportunities as well. And it was interesting speaking with them, because they were so diverse and so different, but really they were all concerned, obviously, with providing, some kind of opportunity for their students to engage in things that they're passionate about. So let's go back a little bit to when you talked about these extracurriculars and the way that distinctives stand out. For our student listeners or parent listeners, or even some of our teacher listeners, how do you recommend students find out what they're passionate about, or to be able to dig deeper into what they love, as you're saying on those college essays? How do they figure out what that is?
I think you really have to try different things. And one of the great things that I love about homeschooling is that, and also progressive education, and progressive education is kind of a dirty word to some people. So I will say Montessori inspired education is that we allow students to explore. And if the class is expressed, or different students in the class are expressing interest about a certain lesson or topic, we don't want to say, oh, well, we have to move on from the Civil War, because the Civil War, we have 3 days, we have to cover the curriculum. Instead, we go where the students are leading. If their interests are in that, we want to make sure that they follow. Let's see. So back when I was a children's librarian, I remember we read together the Chocolate Touch, which was about King Midas, but a contemporary take on it, so that everything that the person touched
turned to chocolate.
So what did we do with that? We investigated Greek myths. We investigated King Midas. We thought about Croesus also. We looked at how chocolate was made. We talked about the ethics of greed and how much is enough. And I mean, it's all the way that these things branch out. And that's how you figure out, by exploration. That's how families and students can really figure out what they're interested in. But if they're not exposed to those things, then there's no way of knowing. I mean, if you don't pick up a clarinet, how will you know that you really love playing the clarinet?
Right.
Got to have exposure.
I've had students that will ask a provocative question. It's sort of related to the topic, but they're obviously doing some heavy thinking. Sometimes I'll simply say, I don't know. but if you'll do a little research, I'll give you a few minutes and a couple of days to share out with the class. And then I let them take ownership of it. And I end up learning something new often. And frankly, I think that's pretty good teaching when I can get the kid to be so excited that they get to share it with the class. I feel like that's often better than me sharing it with the class.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Follow the students, follow where the student leads. Yes, definitely. Bravo.
Excellent. I definitely, I agree with you again on the science fair. We always start with, what are you passionate about? And let's find a science fair research question in some topic you like. That's the only hope you have to get them to do good work.
One of the areas that we've kind of pivoted with regards to COVID was we started writing, well, I should say we, but it's students, middle school, high school students writing technical papers for conferences, many of which have been selected, which then allows a student to not only investigate a topic that they're interested in, but then they have to write at a high level. So invariably, you kick it back and they're learning that process, and then they get to go share about it somewhere in the public. And one of my areas of research has kind of become the idea of starting young enough to where you can form an identity. So we go back to the idea of these educational psychologists, the idea of Vygotsky and so forth, the idea of student development, right? I think a lot of times we don't realize that students who are young, as early as kindergarten, are in that process of forming what they believe they can be. And so as I think about my own experiences as a child, and you talk about you don't know until you pick up the clarinet, it was really until I went on a trip to MIT with the kids and with Kevin, where I went, oh my gosh, I had no idea that these kinds of jobs existed in engineering. I thought you had to be like, I'm going off to work on my engineer and I've got to be like super smart in math or whatever. There are all kinds of opportunities that we just never even get to experience. So would you suggest that, as you were talking about a kid who finds an interest in something, that they expand upon that in many different ways in order to kind of build almost like I don't want to say a resume, but to like build almost a portfolio or something that shows that they've, elaborated on that?
Absolutely. And it's really great if you can, if they can have hubs and a hub and spokes of the wheel that all tell a cohesive story. And one of the things that I'm so glad that you mentioned is the OECD. So this is an international group. And what they're finding is that teenagers' career aspirations have actually compressed, which is very dangerous. So what we're seeing is that now teenagers around the world are actually considering only 10 jobs, like veterinarian, doctor, police officer, architect, that were around in the 19th and even 18th century, rather than looking forward to the 21st century. And what they found is that this is less true in countries that have strong apprenticeship programs. I highly recommend looking at these reports. There's a video, there are different reports to read, and it's really fantastic by the OECD.
That's one of our goals with the academy as we start to get it off the ground is to form those apprenticeships where students are actually, they're learning in their field, but they're going and then working and starting a career path that way as well. Let's talk about jobs in general for students. I mean, how does that look in college applications? The idea of maybe it is an apprenticeship. I bet that looks great, but just working in general, it seems like teenagers today don't go to work. They just stay home.
Unfortunately, and I wonder if I could find that for you. Unfortunately, the survey done by National Association of College Admissions Counselors found that admissions officers value work not very highly. And actually, we can go back to our University of Miami screen. Let's go back there. So look, now work experience at University of Miami is considered highly. So that's great. That is not true across the board. So again, it's really important if students, especially in Florida, students tend to say, oh no, my family is a U-Miami family, or my family is Seminole, my family is Gators. So
right.
if you know where you want to go, you need to look at this common data set and see what they value ahead of time. But let me show you something else. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York, it gives labor market outcomes for college graduates by major. And I wanted to particularly show you something here.
Look at Aerospace.
Exactly. Aerospace unemployment rate is 3.8%. The underemployment rate is 21%. Now, let me tell you look what it is for, say, animal and plant sciences, anthropology, art history, 56%. Now,
About political science, my poor daughter out there still looking for a job, right?
You
well,
know,
let's go down there.
Let's see. Yeah.
Ms. Kost, I've always told the kids that right now aerospace is not being commoditized, and there are no, all jobs in aerospace are good paying jobs. So I think you just proved that statement correct.
I'm gonna do, what?
I can show you something else too. I do want to show you something else. But look, underemployment means that people are employed in jobs that have not typically required a bachelor's degree. Right. So that's very low for aerospace engineering. And look at the median wage mid-career, 100. That's higher than just about anything else.
I'm going to show this to my son. He just went off to UCF for that, and we were like, look. And if you'll send me these links too, I'll actually put them in the links. That would be awesome.
So I want to show you two more things if you don't mind.
Sure.
This is UF student outcome data. I love that UF puts this out. Not every university does, but they should. And I'll show you this. So if you look at, these are starting salaries of UF graduates. And if you look at aerospace engineering, average starting salary is 67, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at astrophysics, starting salary 84,000. I mean, this is unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you were to take a look at some of the other fields, should we do political science?
We should only because I have to talk with her later this afternoon about what's out there. It's helpful for us.
Let's take a look. All right.
And for our listeners that she's pulling this up, these are some really amazing links that I didn't know were out there as a parent. So if you have a student who's in high school, you got to check out these great sources.
The current link Ms. Kost is looking at is career.ufl.edu.
Yeah, and I'll post all these links in the chat area. Oh, wow. There we go. The average salary. Yep, she's 43,000.
And the other great thing about this site is that so that's in the circle, but in the squares, they tell you what they're doing. So what they're looking, what their jobs are that they've gotten, that they've been able to acquire.
Yeah.
Sales.
For the visual learners out there, it's a very nice dashboard with very nice color coded and weighted. The squares or rectangles are weighted, right, according to the value.
I'm going to go on right after and look at FSU because she's graduated. She's like, hey, I've got this master's degree. I'm ready to go out and work. And she can't get a job because she doesn't have the experience. And so it's that cycle of how do I get the experience? I've got the degree. So it's really good to know for our listeners who are more STEM focused that what Mr. Simmons has been telling you about the field is a little bit.
That's why I still go back to Algebra 1, right? Algebra 1 is the gate for all great jobs. If you can get through Algebra 1 and you can do these maths, every door is open to you for a career. But struggle in math, your options become very limited.
Yes. And I always say my one regret in life, if I had to do my life over again, would be I would have gotten tutoring in middle school and high school to raise my math because Florida trails the nation. That's embarrassing. Florida trails the nation in students graduating with calculus and physics. Now, I can tell you that at Oxbridge and also the boarding school that I was with for 6 years in California, students would graduate typically not only with calculus, say A, B, and B, C, but also would graduate with differential equations, multivariable calculus, even number theory. So that's really, if you have I would say middle school parents, any middle school parent who's listening, invest in math tutoring because you want your son or daughter to graduate with calculus, because it really expands his or her options. I also want to draw your attention to this other article that I think is really interesting about double majoring. So I'm going to scroll down, and majors that combine business and science or math have returns more than 50% greater in terms of salary than the returns to having a single major in these fields.
Wow. That goes back to that whole idea of connecting. I know when we met all those years back, talking about the idea of having entrepreneurship as part of the program that we're looking to do. So I think that that's a really good reminder.
Right. I
know we're to the end of the podcast, but I want to give you an opportunity to tell us as we're closing out where people can maybe contact you. I know you have 3 books. I want to mention those in the intro as well. So tell us a little bit about how our listeners who want to reach out to you to get more information, how can they best, find you?
They can reach me at Carolyn Kost at yahoo.com. So it's Carolyn, K-O-S, like Samuel, T like Teresa, at yahoo.com. And I'm happy to give advice. And I'm also happy, of course, to walk families right through the admissions process, and also what courses to choose in high school and what activities.
Great. And you have 3 books out there, one of which I know is part of a curriculum that was used at, I wanted to say, forget which university. Remind me again. Johns Hopkins, right? So in general, we can find your books, we can contact you, and any parting words for any of those parents out there that you want to give them the last hurrah. What should they do to get their child prepared for this year? Aside from that,
help your child to find out what he or she really enjoys doing, and let your child take the lead.
We appreciate
Yeah.
that one too, right? Yes. We could do a whole new other episode on why parents need to break away. That would be a good one. I think we'll have to. We hope to have you back again. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. And everyone, please, you're missing out if you don't reach out to Carolyn Kost to get some advice. She's fantastic.
Thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.